Former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison after being charged and convicted of seditious conspiracy for his role in the January 6th Capitol riots. Now, Tarrio, who served as national chairman for the far-right Proud Boys group, has received the longest sentence so far of any of the January 6 defendants. Judge Timothy Kelly said he would not grant the full 33-year sentence sought by federal prosecutors, but would grant a higher sentence than other extremist members in the hopes it would act as a deterrent. Tarrio, it should be noted, was not present in Washington, D.C. or the Capitol on January 6th. So this is something I talked about in my radar yesterday regarding the conviction of two of the other Proud Boys leaders who were in January 6th, who were there on January 6th and got significant sentences, 17 years. I can't remember what the other one was, but the very long sentences because they were perceived as having organized the event, and the prosecutors added a terrorism enhancement. That's why these sentences are so long. They're accusing them essentially of organizing a terrorist attack. And the judge, that Timothy Kelly, he basically said, it's not a full terrorist attack, but okay, I guess it's kind of a terrorist attack. So he gave prosecutors half the sentences that they were asking for. We were just talking in another segment about, you were talking about the need for sentencing reform to not have people in prison for so long. Look, I absolutely think these people who were there, I mean, Tarrio wasn't even there, but the other people did engage in trespassing and some other things. So I have no problem with them getting prison sentences, being charged. But this is so extreme, so harsh, so punitive, such long prison times for what was not it was not a terrorist plot. It was not a plot to overthrow the government or prevent Joe Biden from taking office, because it could have never succeeded. They interrupted a government meeting. Again, bad, charge them, but they were not actually engaged in like a coup to take over the government. That was never going to work. The government was just going to meet at a different time elsewhere to sanction the exchange of Biden's taking of office. So I feel like we're engaged in just totally like resistance, liberal, magical thinking about what happened on January 6th at this point. It was very bad. It was not ever actually going to stop. What literally the literal riot on January 6th was not ever a planned, organized thing that was going to have anything to do with stopping Joe Biden's taking office. And these sentences reflect something that is just fundamentally not true, and I'm pretty annoyed about it.
But it's the thought that counts, Robbie, right? They want
that's basically what they said.
To be overturned.
Yeah.
I think it's a weird situation because you have Joe Biggs showing a ton of remorse, saying, like, I'm never going to do politics again. It seems to me that if we're upset at these people for doing this thing, what are we accomplishing by putting them in jail? That's a valid question. It seems that Joe Biggs, the Proud Boy who commented on it, has learned his lesson here and doesn't want to be involved in politics anymore and sees that they got carried away. Were there people who entered that building with the intent, it seemed, to commit violent acts against AOC and Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence? Yeah, it seems that a lot of them had violent intent. That's something that our justice system should absolutely interrogate. I think it's a weird thing balancing the fact that people died that day, that there were people who showed up who did want the election to be overturned. There were people who were there that I'm sure really wanted to hang Mike Pence or find Nancy Pelosi or find AOC and do terrible things, potentially kill them, yes. Then I have, on the other hand, what an amateur job it was, how poorly researched their work was, how unsuccessful they were at the end of the day. Those two things are really difficult. And I think there has to be some other solution when I think about our system of justice of how do we resolve this from happening again? How do we, reform these people's way of thinking about our political system so that they don't believe the election was stolen, which we know definitely that it was not? How do we sit down with them and look through the evidence? Would that be more productive than putting them in prison for many, many years? Yeah. That's really what I think about when I think about this kind of a situation, is if we want to prevent things like this from happening, is putting a few people in jail or prison the way to do it. And I just don't think it is.
Not for 22 years. I absolutely support prison sentences. I'm not a prison abolitionist. I think there should be some punishment for they engage in trespassing. Biggs at least took down the barricade. Obviously, Tarrio wasn't even there. But maybe his communications or something, they felt like he deserved some kind of, he's been at other events. Just charge them for what they actually did and give them a sentence commensurate with that. Some of these January 6 people have been in prison like this whole time, right? So they have time served. That seems like a deterrent to me. Again, some reasonable sentence, but 22 years, that's the sentence you give for someone who murdered someone or murdered multiple people, someone who planned to actually blow up a building maybe. They had no actual plan. So I was there. I covered, as I've said numerous times on this show, I was covering the protest, which then turned into a riot. There is no doubt in my mind it is largely spontaneous because the crowd was riled up from having heard Trump. 95% or more of the people there were engaging in First Amendment protected activity. They were protesting. They had signs. They were angry. They had every right. You don't have to agree with the cause they're there for, but they have every right to engage in First Amendment protected activity on the steps of the Capitol, in front of the Capitol. A smaller number of people then struggled with police, tore down barricades, smashed the windows, went in, defiled the place, prevented the meeting from happening. I'm fine charging all those people. Obviously, they got to be, convicted in a court of law. They get due process and the benefit of the doubt. But that's fine. But let's not chalk it up to it wasn't 9/11. It wasn't Oklahoma City. It wasn't the Boston Marathon bombing. It wasn't even close to any of those things. It was a protest that got out of hand and became a riot. And we need sanity. Calling it terrorism or calling everything terrorism is gonna backfire, by the way, on like leftist protesters or anti-police Black Lives Matter protesters type people. Imagine if you're charging all of them with terrorism and locking them up. I think many liberals and Democrats would be outraged about this, but I am not seeing outrage about these sentences from the mainstream media whatsoever. I had CNN on last night, and they were talking about it. They were certainly not. They didn't seem shocked at the length of the sentences, or didn't have any concern that was a little wild. Again, for someone, the most recent sentence, Tarrio, not even there on the day of the riot.
Yeah, I think it's already backfiring for a lot of folks on the left. When we talk about what's going on in Stop Cop City, there's some smoke signals coming out of Atlanta and Fulton County that there's actually going to be RICO charges against a lot of the organizers around Stop Cop City. So when we think about our right to protest and we think about what happened at January 6th, you think about the crimes that were actually committed. Police officers lost their lives, or the police officer that lost his life was trampled by many of the folks that were in the crowd. So it's very difficult to say, who's responsible for that death. When you think about the people going into the building saying, we need to find Nancy Pelosi, we need to find AOC, we need to hang Mike Pence, it becomes very difficult to identify, the people responsible for escalating this to the point of people committing crimes at January 6th, to the riot getting completely out of hand. Are the people who organized the protest responsible for the crimes committed by those people who attended it? That's a valuable question. What happened at Stop Cop City that's signaling they should have RICO charges against the organizers? I have absolutely no idea. For them to say, you're trespassing and you're camping out here and trying to prevent us from having this huge militarized police training center for good reason. I think people don't want their country to have a huge militarized police force. At what point are we losing our right to protest when organizers are getting RICO charges and these huge sentences? That's a valuable question to be asking. And is our justice system just not equipped to interrogate these crimes, to investigate them, to figure out what really happened at January 6th and who is responsible? That's, I think, another major concern surrounding this. But it does have implications. I think you're right, Robbie, on the right and on the left.
Well, we will continue following that, and we'll have more Rising right after this.